I think he failed 8 or 7 to 9 times.
What's the XAI and X thing doing?
Tesla has had 6 or 7 million robots roaming around the world collecting data.
And XAI is also trying to, laser focused on surfacing truth.
经济之下无秘密，欢迎来到本期的查理聊财经。我们今天要看的就是特斯拉的最大支持者 Ark 基金的木头姐对于 Elon Musk 以及旗下的不同的公司的深度解读。他认为特斯拉并不仅仅是一家汽车公司，它是全球目前最大的 AI project。他也在本段视频当中，从 Robotaxi 到 Neuralink 到 SpaceX 到 X 还有 XAI 马斯克的相关的公司，来着重说明马斯克是如何颠覆汽车、医疗、金融与机器人产业，也提到了未来的5到15年，这些布局可能会产生数十万亿的新的市场。那么包括 Robotaxi， 为什么人们未来可能更趋向于不拥有自己的车辆，而是选择去做 Robotaxi？ 那么 Robotaxi 未来呢将如何颠覆人们的出行方式，如何抢占市场，并且 Robotaxi 的优势是在哪里？也谈到了 X 和 XAI 是如何使用一个新的 AI strategy 来面对市场，并且收集数据的。最后一部分是 Optimize 人形机器人未来的发展以及它的发展难度在哪里。那么 Cathie Wood 也表示呢，人形机器人的研发与发展的难度可能要比 Robotaxi 高1000倍还要更多。但是他看好未来全球会有一个万亿级的人形机器人的市场增长潜力和份额。
And I think in his brilliance, and this is more than serendipity, this is just brilliance, he saw that there was a convergence among technologies that was going to take place with AI at the center, which puts proprietary data at the center, I guess I should say. That's the competitive advantage. When you look at Tesla, for example, and we were talking a bit about this before, most analysts following it, thought they were following an auto company, but they weren't. They were following the largest AI project on Earth. And they were also following the convergence among robotics, energy storage, and AI. So you have 3 separate S-curves for each of those technologies, and then they start feeding each other, as we believe we will see, I should say, in robotaxis, and you have explosive growth. And, we began to think, okay, as we were moving into the AI age and we understood proprietary data is the name of the game, competitive advantage. Look at all of the different data that Elon has amassed. Nobody has his autonomous robotaxi data or his robot data. We've all been driving robots. We didn't know it, didn't think about it that way with a Model 3 and a Model Y for me, but we were gathering data for him every day. X, nobody has those data feeds. If you look at even Neuralink, what is the biggest data explosion out there emerging? It is what we call multiomics data, genomic revolution data, DNA, RNA, proteins. And guess what? He's doing Neuralink. And neural networks, think AI, are patterned after the brain. He understood all of this, I think. And then, of course, you've got SpaceX, which is, another new orbit of data. So I think that's the secret. He understood this. And Brett has been totally obsessed with AI since, even before, probably we began the firm in 2014. But especially after deep learning and transformer architecture in 2012 and 2017, specifically to Ark. And so he has another very original take on this.
I think he is intolerant of sloth and delay. And when you have a rapidly changing technological landscape, where it's actually exactly how the tools can be used, the most important thing you can do is to do a lot of experimentation. And so he drives his team hard to get to basically like an end result. And the end result could be the rocket exploding, But the technological landscape is changing so quickly, then you actually know what next move to make with better information on the back end if you're kind of driving to that velocity. And so in times of technological transition, vertical integration is a dominant strategy. He clearly embraces that. And then having a very rapid iteration loop is really critical. And so, of course, we have exposure across like Neuralink. We own in our venture fund. We have SpaceX. We're obviously big investors in Tesla, as everybody knows. X and XAI, now a combined entity. We have exposure to them through the venture fund. We really believe in kind of his philosophy for kind of developing product in an iterative way that ultimately gets to, things that'll transform the world. His other superpower is that he's willing to take on short-term pain for a long-term gain of mission for his companies and, gain of return for investors. And so that's characteristic across all, whether it's crashing rockets or basically, laying out the assets that eventually will be robotaxi capable, and now they are, on a sensor stack that everybody said was not going to be viable for robotaxi. And just being willing to like lay the foundation that he sees as going to, provide monumental returns over a medium time horizon, which aligns with us, despite the fact that everybody likes to make fun of him, about kind of like the incremental step as if it's not going to work.
I'll just tell a story. We come from a world, the traditional asset management world. This is not venture. We're very much involved and excited about venture with our venture fund. But the traditional world, failure was not allowed. I mean, it was frowned on. It was, even you miss your operating income margin by 30 basis points. That'd be a disaster. That's ridiculous. What do we see Elon do with Falcon 9? 1 failure, 2 failures, 3, 4, 5. I think he failed 8 or 7 to 9 times. And then he got it right. And he's had hardly any failure since. And now he has 90%, maybe more than that, Brett, of all of the satellites in the universe.
Yeah. Great. Maybe not the universe. We don't know what's happening.
Yes, we do.
Let's not overclaim here. But certainly in the solar system, yes. I think that's a fair statement.
I believe in April, X, the formerly Twitter social media platform, merged with XAI. What's the AI strategy here? I mean, get into Elon Musk's head around this whole confluence. We'll talk about robotics and Tesla a little bit later, but just isolating the AI piece. What's the XAI and X thing doing?
I think you can think of X as a data platform and then a real-time execution environment for building very good AI. So if you look at the rate at which Reddit is monetizing its data, the value of X's data annually should be around $1.5 billion. So there's in integrating, they get less concern. So XAI had some access to that data, but it had to be an arm's length deal that tied in distribution. And you can imagine if they want to on an incremental basis do something else, then you have to renegotiate the deal. So it makes it's more efficient to combine the entities. So you're not having to face the friction of that, what effectively becomes an internal contract. X of itself is, a profoundly powerful platform in terms of instead, it's all the world's newspapers, and it's the particular newspaper for you. The direction of travel for them is to become more of a financial super app, being able to buy, sell, and hold anything, being able to transfer resources. I think information transmission is actually not that far apart from money transmission, particularly as you digitize monies. And so that serves as a execution environment where then XAI can have its agents operating. And so one of the examples, they signed this deal with Polymarket. I'm sure you're familiar with Polymarket. The high level thesis for us of what's going to happen with prediction markets is that you're going to have, more of the world's going to get financialized into more and more granular contracts that gives you a better read on kind of what's going on in the world. And the reason that hasn't happened to date is because you can't get enough liquidity into any individual contract unless you attract a lot of attention. But if you have AI agents that are operating in these markets and can do a reasonable job underwriting, then you'll get much more efficient markets. And so you'll have a much better kind of market-informed view of the state of the world. on all kinds of particulars that matter to companies, particulars that matter to individuals, which then will allow kind of risk transformation functions to take place in a DeFi way, as in you'll be able to insure an individual house on an individual block through kind of like DeFi, because you'll be able to index back to kind of the prediction market on the fire risk for that particular area, in a way that you couldn't prior. And then XAI is also trying to, laser focused on surfacing truth. So you can think of it like as data distribution, execution environment, and then just like eliminating friction within kind of like these two closely partnered entities. So I think that, like, if you imagine XAI is clearly in competition with OpenAI, and OpenAI has its ChatGPT platform where it's doing hundreds of millions of active users. Well, by XAI partnering with X, they have more unfettered access to hundreds of millions of active users. So it gets them kind of a data advantage as well.
The biggest AI project on Earth near term is the Robotaxi project. The most profound is in healthcare, curing disease, cutting the time to discover new drugs and get them to market, perhaps in half or over the next 5 to 10 years. And as I mentioned, diagnosing disease in its earliest stages when we can do something about it, or curing disease, which is the convergence among sequencing technologies, artificial intelligence, and CRISPR gene editing. And just to put a fine point on the kind of data project we're dealing with in healthcare, each one of our genomes has between 35 and 40 trillion cells.
If you buy a new car in the US, you are you're basically buying a bundle of miles. And it's for $1 plus per mile that you're buying that bundle of miles. Basically, you're buying the asset to have the option value to travel for $1 plus per mile. We think Tesla's Cybercab will be able to, deliver miles at less than 50 cents a mile, where you won't even have to drive. And like the Model Y and Model 3 that they're rolling out on now, could deliver very profitable to Tesla miles at $1 per mile or less. So you'll either be like, I'm going to buy a new car that gets me miles at more than $1 per mile, or I can be driven around all the time for $1 or less. Like, who would choose to buy the new car? You have to be a very niche user, like where you have esoteric requirements, like, I need to haul around stuff in the back of my truck. Well, then maybe you still buy the truck. But for most people, kind of like their default mode of getting from point to point will transform. And so if you look at the number of miles driven in the US or globally, like it's trillions, and a Tesla that was once sold to an end user for, call it $5,000 in operating profit or so, can now do potentially 100,000 miles a year at $1 per mile on some platform fee to Tesla, which nets to, tens of thousands in potential operating earnings per vehicle in fleet for as long as the vehicle lasts. So it transforms the business model of Tesla. I'm most excited because it transforms my life. I live in LA. And like getting from place to place in LA is a huge pain. Like, I'm lucky I have a Tesla. I use FSD all the time, but I still have to like pay attention to the road. Like, I'd rather be able to just work, and have the option of going from place to place inexpensively at the same time, and have the option of sending my kids off somewhere without having to drive. I think that, one, I love Waymo. It's a great product. It costs roughly as much as an Uber today, and you have to wait a little longer, but people still take it because one thing about Robotaxi, it's going to be like spot on the average. Whereas you get an Uber driver, you might get a good Uber driver, but you also might get a bad Uber driver. And so you have a lot of vol in terms of your experience. Like, I don't know if you've ever been in a smelly Ubermobile, but it's not fun. And so, or somebody driving super erratically. The is they committed very early on, even before deep learning came into play, to a very hefty sensor stack, which then raises the cost of the computations they have to do, and raises the cost of manufacturing and servicing the vehicle. It looks like the cost of Waymo's sensors alone is roughly as much as Tesla is going to need to spend to manufacture the entire Cybercab. So on the one hand, you have a bundle of sensors that you still have to attach to and manufacture a vehicle to support. On the other hand, you have a fully functioning robotaxi, same cost. The issue is that is the most sensitive factor to the cost per mile you can deliver to your end customer, because the cost of your manufacturer correlates with the cost of maintenance. It also means you're hypersensitive to utilization of the network. So the other issue Waymo has is basically there are way too many Waymos at night and not nearly enough during the middle of the day, because they have to strike this middle ground where they have to have the assets sitting around. Whereas compared to Uber, where there are some people who Uber drive full time, like they Uber drive all the time, they provide the base load. There's some people who are like, I can't be bothered to try to do it unless they're offering me a higher rate. And so they get pulled in with their vehicles. Tesla's advantage of having a mass manufactured set of vehicles that can all operate as robotaxis is they can have their own owned and operated baseload vehicles that go all the time. And then they could send to the screens of people that own Teslas. It's like, hey, do you want to send your vehicle out as a robotaxi now for $120 for 3 hours? And so they'll be able to demand match or supply match the demand curve for transportation. I think Waymo, one, is cut through the regulatory thicket to some degree, but their tech has built up over a period of time, which makes it difficult for them to scale. And then Tesla, assuming they can cross the threshold of commercialization, which they are just now doing with their sensor and technology stack, should be able to scale very rapidly. To give you a precise data point, Waymo is expected to produce additional robo-taxis this year, because they have to buy these Jaguar vehicles and then they have to fit all the sensors on, and they use a company called Magna to do that. And next year they might get to 4,000. That's their plan. Tesla produced 2,000 vehicles today before lunch.
Well, there's another there's another thing. I often say Tesla has had 6 or 7 million robots roaming around the world collecting data. This is again, we're back to the data conversation and pushing it back. Waymo, so that's orders of magnitude more data than everybody else combined. So I think that's a very, very powerful.
Yes. So then also your ability to improve in market is conditioned on the number of assets you have that are operating in that market. So Tesla should also be able to have, not only should they be able to launch, they're launching in Austin now, but any market they enter, they should be able to ramp up in terms of capability. And you could think of capability as like number of places you can go, like how big is the map that you can address. You could think of capability as, can you go on highway? Waymo still doesn't commercially go on highways. You could think of capability as like, how fast can you get from place to place? Like, can I get into Tesla and be like, follow that car? Or, I'm in a hurry, and you have capability of like the vehicles being able to communicate to each other and beginning to platoon on highways and do things that allow them to generate better throughput. And then you can also think of like the broader set of Elon enterprises and think about these private tunnels he's digging under cities and say, hey, I really need to like go from the valley to the west side in LA without going over the 405 overpass. And he might dig a tunnel that the Tesla cybercabs can go through that Waymo won't have access to.
Yeah, so it's the convergence of the same three technologies, right? Robotics, obviously, energy storage, and artificial intelligence. So, Elon says that he believes Tesla will be number one in humanoid robots around the world. And then number 2 through 10, he thinks, are going to be in China, from China, because they are so focused on, and from a demographic point of view, they need to be, but also they have this government-driven initiative, new productive forces. So
with humanoid robots, that's the technology that has actually moved furthest to the left as a result of the acceleration in AI for us. We really thought it was an early 2030s type commercialization event that, because of the rate pace change in AI, has been pulled forward, where now it looks like late 2020s is when you'll have these things useful enough to meaningfully commercialize. And right now they are not useful enough to meaningfully commercialize. Like, they trundle around in factories, they pick up things. They're kind of like demonstrations of potential capability. As I described, like the acceleration in language model space is translating to the acceleration in robotaxis, and it also translates at some delay to the acceleration in robots. At a very high level, a humanoid robot we think is around 10,000x harder than a robotaxi. It's wildly hard. Think about how easy it is to drive. You just have to go left and right and then brake or accelerator. Those are your only three options. The sensors are at the same spot in the vehicle every time. With a robot, you have all of these independently operating degrees of freedom. Plus, when you move your body, your sensor set shifts and you're operating in an environment that's not designed necessarily to instruct you what to do. You don't have lane changing markings in a hallway, so there's it's an unstructured, very, very challenging problem. The advantage in robots is that you are more error tolerant. If you get in an accident, that's a big deal in a car. If you bump your shin, you don't like it, but it doesn't, cause death and destruction. And so we think that it's 10,000 times more difficult, but maybe you're 100 times more error tolerant. And net, it ends up in this spot where we think kind of real commercialization can happen in the late 2020s, given our expectation for the rate of pace of change in underlying AI. And for Tesla specifically, yes, they have the same chip in the robot that they have in their vehicles. That's an advantage. The real world data they get off their vehicles and the data center they're using to train their vehicles, they'll be able to shift into kind of the robotic space. So everything they're learning there translates. And so, I think they are a set of ingredients to win in this market. Mm-hmm. And it's still, and also they have the internal demand, as in they can turn the robots on in their factories to do stuff. But net, I would say it's kind of clearly a multi-trillion-dollar potential opportunity where we're still very early on knowing exactly when these things will be capable enough that you or I would want to buy them into the household. But I do think you could imagine the way in which the future is going to shift is previously US households devoted, call it $30,000 to a vehicle that they only used 5% of the time to drive them around. Well, you don't need that vehicle anymore because a robotaxi will drive you around. So you have extra capital. What are you going to put it into? You'll put it into a humanoid robot that'll kind of do the dishes for you. It'll fold most of the laundry, but at first it won't be able to fold all of it, but it'll still be better from a convenience perspective. It'll walk your dog. You no longer have to pay for dog sitting. It'll fill in kind of some of these gaps, but imperfectly. And you'll be satisfied with it because it'll save you, half an hour or an hour of housework a day, which is great ROI from, taking that capital and devoting it to that thing. And once it's in household, it'll get better over time at things.
We should size both of these markets. So the robotaxi market globally, the entire ecosystem, we expect within the next 5 to 10 years to be an $8 to $10 trillion opportunity, with half of that roughly going to the network providers like Tesla or Waymo. We really do think Tesla is in the pole position. And then the humanoid robot, we size as a $26 trillion opportunity.
Wow.
In the next 15 years. And to put that in perspective for people, the global GDP today, so just 1 year's output of goods and services, is about $130 billion.
Trillion.
Trillion. Oh, I'm sorry. Trillions, of course.
我们可以看到未来世界的发展趋势一定是 focus 在 AI、focus 在无人驾驶、出行、人形机器人等等方面。感谢收看本期的查理聊财经。那么我们将每期为你解读一位经济大咖的采访，目的是拓宽我们的认知，并且能够接收到一手的来自于这个行业最前端的消息。